Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Small Talk wherever you are. Hope you're having a lovely Monday. I'm Amy, this is my partner Maggie.
Hello.
And this is the series where we generally take things a little bit more cruisy. We have a little bit of a chat, sometimes answer some infrequently asked questions.
Yes.
And then we always talk about 5 filler or small box games. But today we're going to start with some postcards because when we made it to 5,000 subscribers, we had a special video where we asked people to send us postcards. And, you know, they're still kind of coming through a little bit. And we're about to hit 10,000 subscribers.
I know, that's pretty crazy.
Which is outrageous.
I still can't really understand how that
I can't fathom
happened.
it. No, it's really snuck up on us as well.
We're very, very grateful to
grateful.
everyone who's subscribed.
Yes, and if you are here because you were referred here over from Tim Chung's channel, who does amazing videography.
Yeah.
He just hit 10,000 subscribers and did a lovely shout out of us.
Yeah.
So if you're here because of him, thank you for joining us. And we
hope
you enjoy. We hope you enjoy Small Talk. So first of all, some postcards. So the first one, now some of these names, I'm going to admit, I had to Google them because I have no idea how to say these places. The first one has this beautiful herd of horses that were ponies, actually, that survived a Spanish shipwreck off the Virginian coast in the 16th century. So this is from Karen Bell. Thank you, Karen, for sending us a postcard. And the name of the place is, Chincoteague.
No. We practiced so much.
We did practice.
Chincoteague.
Chincoteague.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I said.
That's exactly what you said.
That's exactly what I said. Chincoteague.
Oh my goodness,
Chincoteague.
Just, yes.
Chincoteague, Virginia, which is a place obviously I've never heard of before, but that is so cool. And it says they swim the herd across the bay each year for an auction to control the herd size. So that's very cool. We have not been to Virginia at all.
It looks beautiful. Yeah, love that.
These ponies are so beautiful.
Sunset.
So thank you so much for sending this postcard.
Yes.
It made it.
Yes, it did. I've got another beautiful postcard here from Columbus, Ohio. A lot easier to pronounce.
I drew the short straw this week.
Uncultured people like us. Oh my goodness. So it says, hi, Amy and Maggie, sending a queer hello from cloudy Columbus, Ohio. Columbus Hump Origins Game Fair, a respectable board gaming con held each year during Pride Week. We're going to have to go check that out.
I didn't know it was on at the same time as Pride Week.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And I'd love to go to Origin sometime. And now even more because we could experience Pride Week.
Exactly.
But I believe it's held in June, which is kind of an awkward between for us with Dice Tower West. And we're hoping to make it to Gen Con this year as well because we have tickets from that have rolled over from 2020. So,
kept rolling over. Like a tumbling weed in the desert.
Yeah.
It's like, and again.
But it is a big ask to get to the US twice in a year. So
from Australia.
But, hoping.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kim.
So this is from Kim and Bailey. There's a little bit more. We're also home to the Arnold, an international bodybuilding competition that is a sight to see. That sounds pretty cool.
That would be pretty fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and a beautiful little drawing as well. Kim, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim and Bailey.
And this one is from, and here we go again, I believe this is pronounced Yore.
Yore.
It's a small town in, I didn't practice this one.
Oh, no.
Friesland in the Netherlands.
Yes.
And it's best known for its coffee and an annual balloon festival.
Coffee, there
which
you go.
Is super cool. And it says here, this is from Teejit. I enjoy your small talks the most.
Aww.
They feel like the casual conversations about board games that I didn't have with my group anymore since COVID.
Now you're in it.
Now you're here and with us on the couch. Thank you so much. That's what we love most about Small Talk as well. It just feels like we're all sitting here. Sometimes I feel like I can ask you a question and then I just wait for the response because I feel like the community here with us is so lovely.
And they respond in the comments. So it is like a conversation. So
and now we'll have a little piece of Yore on our wall of postcards.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sending that.
Yes.
And so this week we actually a couple of weeks ago, we had a great question from a viewer. That was a infrequently asked question, but it was kind of special because Stephen asked us to do our top 5 mechanics.
Yeah.
And this is like a video that we were thinking about doing as a separate video.
On its own.
As like a top 10. But then we thought, why not? Why not bring it into small talk? So today we're just going to focus on that, and we're going to take you through our top 5 mechanics. And I have to say, me as a thinker, I could not narrow it down to 5. I really struggled, and I'm still not sure about the order, and especially around like the 5, 6, 7 mark. I don't know. I'm not sure about number 5 being where it is.
It's like picking between favorite children.
Because every mechanic brings something so exciting, and a lot of my favorite games have like a combination of mechanics. So narrowing it down to like I'm not sure it's because of one, it's the combo. It's the combo that makes, for me, like this amazing game experience. It's the tensions created through like the use of, not one by itself. So very few games are purely one mechanic.
Yeah, when a game sort of comes together and it's better than the sum of its parts, mechanically speaking.
Yes. So I'm going to really struggle with this one, but we'll give it a go.
So I should say, this is actually not going to be an IAQs session. It's going to be an IAQ, so we're actually only going to cover one.
Yes.
So everyone else who submitted questions, we will be covering them in the next episode, just because this one is going to take quite a bit.
And Stephen's been waiting because we didn't cover this one in the last episode. So we'll push them forward to the next one. And we always have time for more IAQ. So if you do have an IAQ, please drop it down and mention IAQ down below so that we don't miss anything. But let's get started with our top 5. Do you want us to kick things off with your number 5?
All right. My number 5 came as a surprise even to me as I was going through them. It is something that I have been talking about a bit recently, because it's something that keeps coming up, and it's quite a hot thing at the moment. And every time I play a game that has it, I'm like, yeah, I dig this. And some people are already probably going to be like, I know what it is. It's trick taking. Trick taking is essentially when you're playing. It usually takes, you're going in rounds playing one card each, and you have a way to kind of win the trick, which is usually the highest card of the right suit wins.
Of the lead suit.
Lead suit, wins. There are obviously variations in terms of, things that trump that or shift varieties. But I'm always so amazed at how many games can be created with that as its core thing. So one of the most recent ones that I really, really loved and we covered was Fox in the Forest.
Yes.
Which is, really lovely. And again, that one, adds these elements of some of those cards also have a special ability. So it's not just the straightforward, highest card wins. There's variation in that.
I really like trick taking as well. I was amazed that The Crew as a cooperative game was something that we both enjoyed so much. I know a lot of people really enjoy those two games. It's something about like the puzzle of trying to work out which cards to play from your hand in which order. I thought Jekyll and Hyde that we recently included, Jekyll versus Hyde. The 2-player trick-taking game was excellent that we looked at recently. We've recently played but have not yet reviewed Brian Boru, which is like a bigger game with a trick-taking element. So there's lots and lots of games coming out nowadays. I really enjoy all the games that come from Japan and other Southeast Asian countries are very much into their trick-taking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think someone mentioned to me in the comments recently that they played a lot of canasta and card games growing up, and I was thinking, canasta was one that I did play a lot with my family.
I don't even, canasta was something that was played all the time amongst the parents, when as I was a kid growing up.
Bridge as well,
not so much in my household, but canasta a lot. And I haven't played it in so long. I can't even remember how to play it.
But Tichu is another one of our favorites.
Really
so I can totally see why this has made it into your top 5.
I also love with trick taking that it's not always about winning the trick. Sometimes you're actively trying to lose the trick. So it's like having that core mechanic where you still, it's like gaming that, higher or lower thing.
And kind of predicting what your opponent's going to do.
Which is very unlike me.
It is very unlike you.
I don't really like trying to get into someone else's mind, but for some reason, trick taking, does it.
It didn't make it into my top 5.
You missed the joke.
I didn't miss it. I heard it.
It just didn't land. It didn't do the trick.
It didn't make it into my top 5, but it was kind of in the periphery of, it would be in my top 10.
Floating around.
Yeah, it would be in my top 10. Now, the number 5 was kind of a tie, like an exact tie. Like I couldn't pick between them. But okay, if I had to pick, I would say my number 5 is tile placement.
Oh, yeah.
Because it covers off so many different types of games in my mind.
Yeah.
You know,
It's almost like an umbrella cop-out in a way.
It's not a cop-out. It's definitely a mechanic. But in terms of the types of games it spans, I know that you have one that is a slight variation on tile placement in your top 5, but we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Yeah.
But tile placement, I thought of like Calico, which is a game that I love. Cascadia also is tile placement. A Feast for Odin, Keyflower, On Mars by Lacerda. Bonfire has an element of tile placement. Of course, the classic Carcassonne. And the list goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I have to, and even there's a tile placement here one as well, Nova Luna. There's like so many games that utilize drafting of tiles and placing them down in a way that satisfies like that really thinky, crunchy puzzle, especially to do with like adjacencies. I really enjoy that.
Even technically, another one that we're covering to Spirit of the Forest is tile placing. Tile collecting.
Yeah, it's
There's
more like
tiles.
tile drafting and set collection, I would say. But
Tiles. There's tiles.
But yeah, no. So that is my number 5 is tile placement.
Okay.
Your number
my
4?
number 4 is it's very similar, but it's specifically around polyomino, and which I believe when I was kind of trying to look at the official term, it's more referred to as grid coverage, which is not quite, because sometimes, for example, Feast for Odin, you do have that kind of polyomino little puzzle in multiple different ways, which I love. But sometimes if it's drawing, so for example, cartographers, or it's not actually a tile, you're actually covering a grid with a specific shape. So yeah, I would say like, I would think of cartographers, I'd think of the one that's more tile style, polyomino, would be the Isle of Cats.
Isle of Cats, yes.
Feast, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so
this is kind of like the polyomino category.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to my tile placement. So I feel like we've got a very similar number. That's my 5 and your 4.
Yeah, although when I think of tiles, I think of other shapes of tiles. Like, you got the hexagons and you're like...
You don't like hexagons, only polyominoes.
I will not touch a... No, that's not true. I love hexagons, but polyomino as that Tetris style puzzle, I really, really enjoy. And it's probably an element of nostalgia from growing
Tetris.
up with Tetris.
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm just folding it into tile placement. So.
Fold in the cheese.
My number 4 is this is kind of one of those ones where the terminology is always kind of mixed up a little bit. I would call it like tableau building, also sometimes referred to as engine building, although I believe in BGG there is no such thing as engine building, and those games are usually classified as tableau building. So I'm just going to use those interchangeably. I recognize that they are slightly different, but for this category, there are so many good games. Seven Wonders Duel, that, when you're collecting those different types of cards, and then they start to build in terms of the resources that you have available to you, but as well as the freebies that you can get, those bonuses. It's so good.
Feels so powerful as the game goes on.
And Pax Pamir as well is one where you're building out a tableau that you can travel across. That's really cool. Lorenzo Il Magnifico, I love in that game where you can choose which engine you're going to build, and then you get more and more stuff every time, which is so cool throughout the game. And It's a Wonderful World as well, where you're collecting certain types of buildings, and then the way that you win that kind of competition for who has the most, because you're building up that collection of resources. So another tableau.
The production in that as well, like you have that sequence of production as you're seeing your things produce those resources, and you're going, it's very satisfying.
So clever. Everdell as well is, we played recently, and that's got the tableau with. So I just really enjoy that as a mechanic. So that is my number 4.
Nice. Well, my number 3 is, again, something that should in theory potentially be higher, me being a themer, but it's actually games that have a rich thematic narrative story element to them. So The reason it's not higher, it's because it wasn't, as a themer, I've only really blossomed into my themer self more so since we started the channel and I started to kind of delve deeper into.
I would say since you started playing solo too.
Yeah,
because I'm not into it. So
well, I used to play solo before, but because we were highly Euro gamers, the solos again weren't, it's very rare to have like rich thematic narrative in a Euro. And so there were elements that I was like, oh yeah, I enjoy how thematic this Euro feels, but I didn't know there was this whole other world of like actual narrative and story that you could delve into. So my examples more recently would be Sleeping Gods was one of the things that awoke in me the journeys that I could be going, the discovery and exploration that I could be going into with a lot of games. And Arkham Horror, the card game, as well. It's another one where it's like, and it's cards, and it's like, you can actually create quite an interesting little story and live out this story. So that would be my number 3.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was looking into like the story type mechanics and the terminology around that. And I believe it was narrative choice, where you're like making a decision. It's like that choose your own adventure style. Do you prefer that more or just narrative context?
Well, that's interesting because again, like looking through the official categories in BGG, they had like narrative choice, which is that whole like choose a path, and they even had like scythe as part of it, which is like there's only really one very quick element in it where you have the narrative choice, but technically it is in it. But then storytelling is what they would qualify, like Sleeping Gods had like storytelling and things, where I actually would think storytelling in my mind, I think of when you're having to come up with a narrative, like when you're having to like improvise a story, which I don't actually like at all. Like I love a story that's already been written.
Yeah, but even when it's already written, do you prefer it to just be the backdrop to what you're doing mechanically, or that it actually informs what happens next?
It needs to inform what happens.
So
there
you
needs
like
to
the
be
choice,
an element of interactivity.
but you like the
with
branching storyline.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's just, I would still enjoy it if it's just like this is the story and you're just living it out. But I do like having a little bit of choice, kind of like with if you play those big like Fallout and those sorts of games that are kind of big and sprawling. There's set narratives
and
that you
the
can
side quests.
Yeah, and then you have the side quests, but there's like core narratives. And then, or The Witcher, we were kind of talking as well recently, going, oh no, I went down a path that I didn't enjoy. Let me trace steps back, and then try and go through another path. So I do like having some options.
Yeah, some choice. Yeah. Okay, interesting. My number 3 might surprise some people, I'm not sure. But my number 3 is area control. And
doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise you, but I think it surprised a few people that dominant species marine was so loved by me. And I also really enjoy games like Blood Rage or El Grande, or even Brian Boru was another game that involves area control.
Yeah.
And the reason why I love it so much, if you think about what I love about games, I'm very directly competitive. There's nothing more competitive than having a limited amount of things that you need to dominate.
Yeah.
And just I love the way that this gets played out. Like take an example of dominant species includes worker placement, and that's allowing you to do things on the board. Brian Boru, you're playing trick taking, that allows you to do things on the board. And what was the other one? Like Blood Rage, you have that whole drafting cards element, which is really cool, and the tension between, using the area control actions versus scoring cards. That's really interesting to me. And so there's all these different ways. El Grande, where you are, again, drafting cards, and there's that tension between the different things you can get done and the area control game. And I kind of love that in area control games, generally speaking, that part of the game fades in. It's kind of, you need to do that to win, but then there's usually these layers that are placed on top of it where it gives you this like, but I need to move my people around, or I need to do this and that, and I can see I'm losing control over there, and it's like this unfolding of like the tension and the stress of like watching someone come in and remove your pieces or add more pieces in, and you're just like, I can see the game falling apart in front of my eyes.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's almost like Yeah, you're right. It's often the area control game. It's like the area control is the end game.
Yes.
But throughout, it's like you've got your day-to-day stuff to deal with.
Yeah, exactly.
and it's usually, all these other actions.
Yeah, and it's like this visible end game. So it's like a victory point tracker that is constantly going up and down. It's just like you can see it play out the end game. And I love that so much. So I really do love area control, which I probably, going back when we first started, I'm thinking about, there's probably an element of area control in Carcassonne even.
Absolutely, because it's not explicit, but it's implicit in the whole trying to, like when you're creating that beautifully huge city area, and then someone starts kind of coming into your turf, and then you're trying to see
counting the number
who's
of
going to have the most
yeah.
meeples present when that
so it's hyper competitive. So number 3 for me is area control.
Nice. Well, my number 2 would be worker placement, which is obviously whenever you have your meeples or your workers and you're putting on different actions to activate different abilities. So the top examples for me are probably our gateway would have been viticulture, where obviously just this concept of sending out, your workers out into the field to do all these different things throughout the different seasons so that you can, get the vines that you need, produce the grapes or harvest the grapes, make that wine, fulfill orders. I just loved so many of those elements about it, and also the tactile element of like actually moving your worker and putting them in different positions.
Yeah, it feels like they're going somewhere. They're off to do your bidding.
Exactly, and then retrieve your workers, and then it's like, and I can imagine some people may not like that, but it's similar to, again, a feast for Odin. You actually have that physical and visual representation of your presence on the board.
I also like, a lot of games that, especially in Euros, they're including the feeding your workers, which implies, or it presents you with a tension between the number of workers you have to get more things done and this penalty of having more workers and the stress that puts on you.
I would say a responsibility. It's not a penalty. It's a responsibility.
It's a tension.
It's a tension.
It surely is a tension.
Yes.
And like in a Feast for Odin where you're just desperately thinking about, having enough food versus actually trying to get things done.
I could upgrade this, huge piece of food that would feed 4 or 5 squares. And then if I upgrade it, I could actually put it on my main board, but then I'm going to have a penalty if I don't.
Yes, Uwe loves feeding workers.
Which is, good. You should feed your workers.
Feed your workers.
And yourself.
Worker placement.
Yes, that's my number 2.
My number 2, well, you know how I love a rondelle.
Oh, yes. I would have guessed that would have been your number 1.
Yeah,
actually.
well, stay tuned. But number 2 is a rondelle. And it was heartbreaking for me that it's not my number 1. But number 2 is pretty high up there. So a rondelle is usually like that circular kind of motion of moving through a circuit in some way, and the way that plays out in terms of turn order. So sometimes it affects turn order where the people behind continue to catch up before the person in front can go again. Or there's that element of like jumping forward versus picking up all the little things. I really love that. One of the best examples for me is Heaven and Ale. I just absolutely really love that game and the tension that comes because of that rondelle. And whether you want to grab the resources or whether you want to jump ahead to the monk. It's so good.
I always
love
linger
that
back and try and get all the goodies that Amy leaves behind. But then Amy has taken all the good stuff and will usually 99.9% of the time, if not 100% of the time, win.
Great Western Trail is another rondelle that I absolutely love because of the fact that if you want to race to Kansas every time, you can just be speeding around at your own pace. Everyone else is doing other things, but you can just be like moving around that rondelle and kind of focusing on what you want to achieve. And Red Cathedral was another interesting rondelle. So I probably haven't. The reason why it's not number 1 is probably because there's not enough of them, in my opinion. And there's some certainly that we haven't played, but I definitely want to see more and more rondelles. I really enjoy rondelles. So that is my number 2. I love a rondelle.
Very nice. Well, my number 1 is deck building, as started by the one and only Dominion. That was my first gateway game that when I played it, obviously deck building is when you're adding cards to your hand or to your deck that is going to be the source of cards that are going to eventually you'll be able to use from your hand. And the building element is that you're kind of ideally making it stronger and stronger. So as the game progresses, you're getting this sense of more powerful actions, or you spend a lot of money or resources to buy this really powerful card, and then you just can't wait for that card to come around from your deck. So Dominion was my gateway game into the hobby, I think, overall, because that was the first time that it just stayed with me, and I was like, next time, what could I do differently? What can I put into that deck? What strategy do I use?
It's still so good today.
Yeah.
If you haven't played Dominion and you've come into the hobby recently, get yourself a copy of Dominion. It is still excellent.
Yeah.
And it is still just so, the tension of when you start to build in those scorecards into your deck, it's so clever.
Yeah, because it's almost like there's two parts to the game. There's like an early part of the game where you're just trying to create a powerful deck. So you're actually trying to use a lot of money or gain even money to have the buying
cards,
capacity to get those strong cards. But then at some point, and that's a beautiful balance, at some point during the game, it shifts to trying to get the cards that have victory points, which if you try and get too early on, they're actually just going to be muddying or diluting your deck and actually are going to be a hindrance, but they are actually the most important thing towards the end of the game. So just like being able to, and again, it's so unlike me, where it's a type of game where you have to be paying attention to when are things shifting, because if everyone's now shifted to getting
timing.
There's a timing element of like if everyone's now shifted to getting those cards, or if the game is about to run out, because it's about like number of depleted piles or on the table, then you're like I need to shift gears. So I love that.
Star Realms is another
Star
one.
Realms
that was in
one.
your top 2-player games.
Which I again really enjoy, because it's the same concept of you're investing in your future, and then you just can't wait for those powerful cards to come around again.
Yeah.
Great Western Trail. So you were talking about Great Western Trail from the Rondell, but in Great Western Trail you also have this deck building element of the cows that you're collecting, which is going to be what allows you to have more powerful, because it's like the sale event when you get to Kansas, having more powerful instances than the more powerful range of cows you end up having in your hand. So.
I also like the deck building element in Lost Ruins of Arnak, which will probably be a bit controversial because it's not hugely like a central part of the game. But what I like about it is you get very few cards in that game, and so for me, I really know what's in the deck for that game.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoy that element of it as well. So it's got a little bit of nice deck building in there.
A lot of people also go Dune Imperium, which has done very, very well.
It has done very well.
Yes. And it's very much loved by a lot of people. I still kind of lean more the Lost Ruins of Arnak. And I think it potentially is like a theme thing as well.
Yeah. And so that was your number one. Number one deck building. Now, deck building was not in my top 5.
Crazy.
It is crazy.
Outrageous.
And I was thinking about it because I do really enjoy it and I love Dominion. I think it's probably a little bit that the fiddliness of the shuffling and then the redrawing, which introduces a little bit of luck and, to do with the shuffle. And so I like it. It would be in my top 10, but it's not in my top 5. My number 1 is worker placement. And when I was thinking about, worker... it seems like a lot of people love worker placement. It's in so many games. So it felt a little cliche to choose worker placement. But then I reflected on like all of the games in our collection and it would just be unfair to not include it in like the top because we are drawn to these games. We generally really enjoy them. There's Everdell again, Lost Ruins of Arnak is worker placement. A Feast for Odin's worker placement. Viticulture that you've spoken about is worker placement. I sneakily included like dice worker placement as part of that.
So I was going to say, there's not a lot of dice amongst, like we're not really big on
but this
dice.
is not rolling, is
No,
it? It's like
is
usually setting. Them. So I think like Castles of Burgundy, if you think about Coimbra, which I love.
Put them in your little dice
castle.
castle.
The little like clicky things and then the turn order and like how you use the dice. I love all of the different variations of worker placement, but what I love most about worker placement is that it's like competitive, but it's not mean, really. It's just annoying when someone takes that one spot that you were looking at and please don't take it. Please don't take it. I just really need to do that action.
Yeah.
And worker placement is a sub-genre, sub-mechanic of action selection.
Yeah.
And in general, I just love all the different variations of action, you know, whether it's an action queue or just the different ways that you can kind of bid for actions and all that kind of thing. But worker placement is definitely my favorite version of that. So
well, you know,
it is very close to my heart. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah. So that is our top 5 mechanics.
Yeah.
You can see there's very little crossover aside from maybe tile placement. But
and worker placement.
Definitely worker placement, and that is a core theme that runs through our collection. But yeah, I was interested that we didn't have the exact same list. Very surprised. We've got one collection of board games, but
it's probably why the collection is bigger than it should be. We need to cull it down. It's probably because there's some variation.
Competing.
As we were kind of going through this, I realized how interesting it is, what we said earlier on, that so many of the games cross over across different the mechanics. Like we repeated the same games, and how it is like, for example, like Great Western Trail. Like we really enjoy that game, and it's got great deck building, and it's got great rondel, and it's got truly a great game is about bringing all of those things together.
And it is about the combination of things, because any mechanic on its own may not be my favorite mechanic, but then you add it in to one of these games that includes one of my favorite mechanics, and then all of a sudden it really brings that. Like, I'm thinking about something like Keyflower, which is essentially like worker placement, tile placement, but then it has this auction, this bidding kind of overlay to it, which normally I don't like. That wouldn't be in my top 10 mechanics, like bidding or auctions, but it works in that game, and I really enjoy it in that game. And so it's really interesting. Yeah. And I just like it also is like what's exciting about the hobby at the moment, because you know, we have all these games that introduce a new mechanic, and usually those are ones that really stick out in people's minds. But then there's all this possibility about all the different combos. I
just had this image of like, it's like cooking. So if you're a game designer, it's like, and you're just like being a good chef. It's like you're able to kind of go, it needs a little bit of this, and it needs a little bit of salt, and it's a little bit of, so it's like, that's with the tension and with the this, and if I add this mechanic. So it's just an art form, and it's beautiful, and that's why I love it so much. I think in essence.
That's why you love what?
Gaming.
Oh, I thought you were going to say mechanics. I thought you were like finally
they're
seeing
an
the
essential
light.
component. Yes, I'm not ever going to hate on mechanics.
The most important component.
It's the how, but it's really
the most important component. Of gaming.
It's the how we do it, but it's the why. The why. Start with why. That's the theme. Why are we even here?
Thank you, Stephen, for that IAQ, which turned into a very long discussion about mechanics. So thank you very much. So now we should move on to talking about some games.
Yes.
So we have 5 new small box games, or ones that we haven't spoken about before.
Yeah.
The first one is Spirit of the Forest by Michael Schacht. And this is an interesting, very quick playing little game where it comes with these beautiful thick cardboard tiles, and you're going to be laying those out in rows to begin with. So you're starting with this huge range of tiles that you can select from, but the trick is that you can only take tiles from the edges. So from the 2 columns on the edge is where you can start drawing in from, or the end of the rows, because they're all going to end up different lengths. And you can basically, in this game, it's set collection. You are looking to make sure that you have the majority in all of the different symbols that are included in this game. So there are all of these different kind of creature symbols.
Spirits. They're the spirits of the forest.
Spirits. And then there's also sun, moon, and wind element symbols as well. And the way that you're going to be drafting these tiles from the center is that you're going to be able to either take one tile that has 2 spirit symbols on it, or 2 tiles that have 1 spirit symbol on it, as long as it's the same spirit.
Same color, same spirit, correct.
So you're going to be taking 2 that match, or 1 that has double, and then what you're going to be doing is kind of laying them in front of you in those different groupings. There are 8 different types of spirits, and if for any one that you don't collect in the game, you're going to get negative points. But then for any majority that you hold at the end of the game, you're going to be able to score the number of spirits in points, and then the number of each element in points as well. So it's very simple, majority and drafting. And the only other element is that you have these little gems. And the gems allow you to kind of place a tile on hold somewhere in the
Reserve
future.
it. Yeah.
And when you reserve it, if someone else wants to take that tile, they're going to have to get rid of one of their gems from the game. So that is kind of a bit of tension around, do I want it bad enough to take someone else's gem off it and sacrifice one of my gems? This is a really quick playing game. I really enjoyed my time with it. It's really simple though. Like, it is a very, very light game. It's very easy because of that to play as a quick filler. Like, I think we played this with my sister recently and we just played 3 games in a row. It's really simple to teach and it just plays really, really quickly.
Yeah, I really enjoyed because again, with this one, there's that tension of one, you want to get the most out of, if you get the most out of a particular spirit symbol that you get to score. But if you missed out on any of those spirit symbols, you actually have an automatic -3 points. So there's this tension between making sure that you have a good spread of everything, but at the same time trying to have some majority in some of
everything.
These. And
you need a bit of everything.
Many as possible. I also played this. It has a solo mode, which is a fairly simple implementation of a solo mode. It simplifies some of the elements. We didn't mention there's also these little tokens that are on top of some of the tiles. That it's almost like a little secret extra bonus spirit symbol. That could mean that because you can see what everyone else's number of symbols are, they might have, if they have a couple of tokens, it's like, oh, they actually might have the token that means that they're gonna win in that spirit category over me. So there's that element. With the solo, it simplifies it a lot in that and it's very, very straightforward. So I love solos that are easy to implement. Most of the tiles are actually face down, and the only 2 rows that you see facing up are the tiles on the edges. And so all that's going to happen is you're going to be taking whatever tile you take on one side, you have to give the AI, or not the AI, the opponent, your imaginary opponent, the directly opposite one. So when I was reading through the rules, I was like, this is really tough, because if in any of those categories you have fewer than the opponent, you automatically lose. So you actually have to make sure that you have either the same or the higher number in all of those spirit categories, or else you lose the game. I found that after playing a couple of times, I did manage to figure out, oh, okay, so this is what I need to be doing. And then I was able to kind of consistently win. So my concern with this would be, it's a really, it's a beautiful game and very easy to play from a solo point, but I think the replayability would wear thin. I think then this would be something that, it's fine to play solo, but I wouldn't be getting it as a solo game. Definitely something that is nice to have to play multiplayer with. It's just a quick 15-20 minute filler. With non-gamers as well. It's so easy.
Anyone really. So that is Spirits of the Forest. Our next game is a game that we backed on Kickstarter, I'll clarify. I backed on Kickstarter. It is a game by Joseph Shaw, and it's called The Rules of Everything. I'm not sure if this game will make it to retail, but or if it is going to retail. I haven't read anything about it, but I picked up this game because we have a group of friends that are very much into the games like Throw Burrito or Exploding Kittens or Muffin Time. They absolutely love Muffin Time. And, these are the types of games that probably aren't in our normal wheelhouse, and they're not games that Maggie and I would ever play kind of by ourselves. Not that they usually play a small number of people, but The Rules of Everything is another party game in that genre that plays 3 to 8 players. So you can actually get a lot of people playing this game. And it's in this tiny little box. It's quite compact. And the objective of this game is to get 10 points, which are these little ticket cards, and then to draw the golden ticket. So as long as you have 10 points and you are the person who draws one of those tickets, you're going to win the game. But The Rules of Everything places rules on you that you have to follow throughout the entire course of the game. And these are absolutely ridiculous. So on your turn, you are simply going to be drawing a card from the top of the pile, which is always going to be either one of those golden tickets or a rule card. And the rule cards are going to be They're very thematic. I
They
think
are.
they're extremely thematic.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it'll be like, I'll read some off the back. So it's like, the rule of drinking tea. The hand holding this card must have the little finger sticking out at all times. And so some of the cards are going to be down in front of you, and other cards have a little symbol on them saying they have to stay in your hand. And so you will be holding this card forever
Until you're able to get rid of it.
unless you want to fold your cards. But when you fold your cards, you also lose all your points. But if you want to try and get to 10 points, you need to be holding it with the pinky up. Then you might get another card that instructs you to hold the card in your hand, and it always has to be touching your right shoulder. That makes it awkward because now you've got a card here and you're trying to hold one on your shoulder. Then there might be a card that makes you dance the entire time, or to applaud people when they get a point.
Yeah.
And if you forget any of these rules and your fellow opponents call you out on it, then you're going to take a penalty, usually by way of losing points. And so, and when you can't pay the penalty, you lose everything. So it's kind of this game of stacking. Well, there's like these stacking challenges, and it is hilarious. Like, it is not a strategic game.
Not at all, yeah.
It is a silly party game in the best of ways. It makes people laugh. I could imagine it would be a good drinking game. But we weren't drinking when we were playing this, and no one was. And it was just so much fun. There was so much laughter. Like, one of them required our friends to make sound effects every time someone drew from the deck, otherwise they would get a penalty. And you're just constantly watching everyone to make sure they're following all of their rules. And this is just one of those games where, Maggie's not a huge fan of party games.
It's like, I'll enjoy it for a little bit, and like by a little bit I mean like the first 2 minutes, and then I'm like, okay, I am done. I want to do something.
Yeah, of course. And they're not meant to be these long strategic games, but this delivered 100% on the fun that I thought it would be when I read it on the Kickstarter. And what more can you ask? So that is the rules of everything, the card game.
The next game is For the King and Me by Steve Finn from Dr. Finn Games and Yellow, published by Yellow. Now, in this game, we are playing as, I believe, it's kind of like, again, I'm going to try and go into a theme, even though it's not a very, it's a fairly abstract game. But we're kind of nobles trying to make sure that by the end of it, by the end of the game, we have played our cards the best and backed the absolute best colors or causes that are going to be worth the most.
That doesn't sound very thematic.
It's a stretch. It's a real stretch.
Because they're coloured suits of cards, essentially. And if you've ever played the game Biblios, this is re-implementation of Biblios. I would say that it's almost just a reskinning of Biblios with one slight twist. And so if you played Biblios, the core mechanic of the game, and the reason why I love Biblios so much, is the way that cards are drafted in this game. So in the first half of the game, you're going to be taking the pile of cards or the deck of cards and drafting cards one at a time. And you're going to be able to keep one of those cards for yourself. And then you're going to put, depending on the number of players, you're going to put one out per player in front of you as a market for the rest of the players. And then you're going to be allocating one to a later auction pile. But the trick of this game is that you can only draft one of the cards at a time. And so you've got to make a decision at what point do you want to keep the card that you have in your hand versus give it to other people. So you might draw a slightly appealing card and you don't know if the next cards are going to be less appealing or more appealing. And so it's that tension every time about which cards do you want to give to your opponents versus keep for yourself. And I really enjoy that. We do that until the entire deck runs out. And then the cards that have been put aside for auction, you've got coin cards that you've drafted along the way in your hand of cards. And there's also that you're going to be using to bid on cards of the different suits. And at the end of the game, the person with the most points in each suit is going to get to win some points for that suit. But interestingly, unlike original Biblios, in this game, you also get points if you're second place on that suit as well. The tricky thing and the interactive thing is that throughout the game, there are also cards that are going to influence the amount of points that a suit is worth. And in this particular version of the game, in Biblios, we have the die that is just going up and down to change the number of points that one suit is worth. In this game, you're manipulating the first player number of points, and the second player always gets half of that rounded down. And so you're not really changing the second player points unless you have to. Whew, that was confusing. But basically, if you like Biblios, For the King and Me introduces second place points. And that's really it. Aside from the theme changing and the fact that now we are no longer using dice as our point counter, we have these cute little ribbons that go under the family crest. And that is one thing that I like about it, in that at the end of the game, it's very easy to divvy up the points because you have your own family crest and you just take the ribbon and put it and kind of clicks under your family crest, and then you simply add up the number of points. I do like the element of having second place as well. However, it feels super fiddly on the way through the game. So the ribbons themselves are quite thin, and you're constantly changing their value. And then based on whatever you change that to, then you've got to change the second place ribbon. And there's a lot of just like...
there's more administration than there was with just the one die that goes up and down.
And because my favorite part of it is really the card drafting, I don't see the point of owning both, first of all.
No. It's the same game, really.
It's the same game. You don't need to own both. And for my preferences and just the fact that I don't really like fiddly elements in game, Biblios and its the shape of its box and the smaller footprint. Biblios is my favorite. I never had a problem with the art in Biblios. It's much more abstract. So if you enjoy the theme of this one and the kind of cartoony style, then certainly check out For the King and Me, but it is essentially the same game.
Yeah, it's the same game. So I do enjoy the artwork in this one. It's not a game, it's a game that I often find myself as I'm going through it. I think because like there's strategy, but not a lot of, there's only so much that you can do with a strategy. Because, for example, even when you're drafting those cards and you're deciding, you're very limited because you're kind of doing one at a time, and you're kind of having to commit of like, maybe hopefully I don't draw, like I'm committing to this card, and then you draw an extra 2 cards and they ended up being better, and so it's like and so I always find that as I'm playing through it, I'm like, it just feels like so many elements of it are luck. And then even when I win at the end, like, because I often will win this one, I'm like, well, there you go. That's cool. I almost, sometimes I'll feel like, I don't feel like I deserved it. Like, I don't feel like I worked hard enough mentally.
I think it's just fun, and Maggie hates fun.
I do hate fun.
So it is just a fun game. Everyone that I've taught finds it really fun, except Maggie. So that is essentially the same game. I was really excited to hear that there was a new version of Biblios, but I have to say it is essentially the same game. I love the core game. So if you don't have Biblios already, check out For the King and Me. Now, the next game is a game by Takashi Sawada. It's coming from Guff Studios, so shout out to the Australian publisher. And this game, Floating Floors, is currently on Kickstarter. So we only have a prototype copy, so of course anything that we show in terms of B-roll on the screen is all subject to change given what happens on the Kickstarter. And I believe there's already some design changes in terms of the aesthetics. But what this game is at its heart is a dexterity game, and you are going to be playing as these separate ninjas trying to go around and collect some bansen, which are these little tokens that are going to exist around the outside of a very treacherous
indeed
path of 3x3 kind of grid of the tiles or cards that you're trying to navigate to get from basically one end to the other usually. And to get across, you are only allowed to step on floorboards of your color. And so you're going to be building these platforms along the way. So you're going to be using these little bricks that you're going to be collecting. And then you're going to be building out these different levels of floorboards and trying to work your way across without falling. And that is the key to this game, is that you are going to be moving all around this board, but the floorboards are very precarious.
Extremely precarious. Because also sometimes the foundation of it is you can't put them in the right places to get good solid balance.
For example, there is one tile where you're placing a floorboard on top and it only has space for putting bricks in the center. So all the top floorboard is only being supported by the center. And so if you have to go around the outside of that, you're in big trouble and you're going to have to, well, there's a few ways that you can work this strategy. You can balance out the weight of your ninja with other little bricks. Which will help. Also, when you have to step on a area that is not in your player color, you can actually put those bricks there and step on top of it, which helps you get through the puzzle, but then makes it even more precarious because your ninja is on top of a brick on top of a very precarious floorboard. So when you're all moving around each other, this makes for quite the dexterity challenge.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was terrible at this game.
Well,
I think you won every game that we've played so far.
Yeah, really, because I tend to, like, my hands tend to shake when I go and do something like fine motor kind of skills kick in, but they shake.
And we're all teasing Maggie
because
and
she's like, you got to shake your hand. And then I was like, with my shaky hand, I still was able to like do everything. It's like,
still won.
Yeah.
And when you actually make a floorboard crash to the ground and the pieces go everywhere, it's the person in the next turn order that gets to put it back together for you, which is really funny because then they, of course, try to make it as difficult for you as possible by putting you just balanced so that you're just about to fall. And then, of course, I would fall again. So so floating floors is a very simple. You can change the level of difficulty, and what it does is it changes the foundations to make them trickier in terms of placing those floorboards on top. It also means that the bandsen, or the tiles that you're trying to collect around the outside, you have to collect them in a number order instead of just whichever order you like, which means you might have to go backwards and forwards across the map.
In a less than ideal path.
In a less than ideal path. But if you enjoy dexterity games, it is very simple and it's very pure in its execution of being a dexterity game. And it's a lot of fun. I imagine like the whole family would enjoy this one. So having kids, children, it's a very family weight game. It's also just, there's a lot of laughter around things falling.
I like that for a dexterity game, it's not too messy. You know how a lot of times if there's flicking and throwing and things, it's like things can end up everywhere. Like this is actually a very contained game, so it's good for, because you still have that dexterity element and there's still the and the laugh, but it's not going to go everywhere. It's not going to cause chaos, which I appreciate.
So if you enjoy dexterity games and the theme, go and check out Floating Floors, which is still on Kickstarter now. And the final game is a game by Uwe Rosenberg, and one that we hadn't played for a long time, and we hear such great things about it. In fact, I think I saw Kovray, our friends Kovray, posting about it recently, saying it was one of their favorites, and it is just such a great little puzzle. So in Nova Luna, you are moving around. It's kind of like the moon. What's it called? I can't remember what the phases of the moon are called.
I don't think there's any real phases, but like crescent, what is it? Like, and descent. No, it's just,
I can't remember what it's called.
It's like a circular. It's almost like a clock.
It is like a clock because you are going to be tracking your time on that. And we were talking about rondelles earlier, and I don't think it's technically a rondelle, but it's the timer in the game, and it's really interesting because those who are behind you are always going to go first. And the reason why that matters is because in this game you're going to be drafting tiles from around the outside of this circular board, and you can choose a tile between 1 and 3 steps away from the moon that is moving around. And so, for example, if I take the first tile, I'm going to take that tile, put the moon in its place, and then place that tile down into my tableau. Now, each of the tiles has some information on it. The first thing that it has on it is a goal, or 2, or even 3 goals that you can meet by putting the right colors adjacent to that tile. So what you want to be doing is looking at how the tiles are going to be put together and make the colored patterns that each of your tiles require. Because when you do that and you can make the color that it requires, you get to cover that goal with one of your circular discs. And this game has no points at the end. It is a race. You want to be the first person to get rid of all of your goal discs. In other words, get the most goals and race kind of in a race to the end.
Yeah.
But the other interesting piece of information that's contained on the tile that you've drafted is a timer. So it's going to have a number on it. For example, it could be 1 or it could be 7, and or anything in between. And you're going to move your little disc on that moon timer, that number of spaces, which means that, the tile that you really want and need for your puzzle is a 7, which means that you're going to be moving really far past all of your opponents, which means they're probably going to get to draft 2 or 3 tiles before your turn comes around again. Which I think is just a really cool and interesting tension in this game. It means that you are just constantly thinking, do I go a bit suboptimal and get a couple of lower scoring or lower numbered tiles before I pick up the tile that I really need?
Yeah, I really enjoyed how they also, the balance is that the higher numbers, so the tiles that have the higher numbers usually have easier goals on them. So goals that only require maybe a couple of colors or in much easier to kind of create combinations of those colors. So you kind of have this, you have this thing of like, well, I'm going to potentially make my life easier by being able to cover up more of these, like use up more of my discs. But at the same time, as Amy said, it's like, no, I'm really, really far away and my opponents or rivals can be taking multiple turns potentially in between. I enjoyed it. It's very, very abstract, but it's like the puzzle itself is quite clever. One thing that stood out to me is how quiet this game is. So it is very multiplayer solitaire because there's not really, I usually struggle to pay attention to what other people are doing, but even halfway through one of the games, I was like, Amy, are you even able to pay attention and like almost like mean draft or hate draft to prevent me from doing, but you're so
it doesn't really matter.
It
doesn't really matter. I found like I haven't lost a game of this so far since we've owned it. And,
undefeated.
And I feel like it's much better to optimize your own puzzle than it is to worry about hate drafting because you can draft one tile that you really need and it completes 3 different goals. And so I'm always just looking at what is the best next move for my puzzle in order to cover the most of those goals all at once. And I really enjoy that puzzle. It is a really quiet game. It's like a cup of tea and it's really simple, but it's challenging.
But that's the other thing. Like there's not really that much player interaction.
No.
And which usually you don't enjoy. And with this one, it didn't really matter.
Yeah, I think it's because, again, it's the puzzle that I enjoy. As long as the puzzle is really kind of satisfying. And it's not a long game where I'm like playing by myself for a long time. This is like a 20,
the turns are very
20
quick.
to 30 minute, really easy game. Quite a satisfying puzzle.
Yeah.
I quite enjoy this one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And of course, Uwe Rosenberg just giving us a game that we enjoy again and again and again. So that is the game Nova Luna, and that's all of the games we have for you. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, our top 5 mechanics and our 5 games. We'll be back next Small Talk with more IAQs, of course. And I think actually by the time that we do our next episode, we will be in the States.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Hopefully, everything going well, we will be in the US. So either we will film this early or we'll film over there. But either way, we'll keep the episodes coming. If you enjoyed this video, please, of course, as usual, hit like. It really does help us out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so we can get close to 10,000, we can get there. And I just wanted to mention that if you are part of the channel membership and you're not already on the Discord, there is a lot of conversation going on in there about Dice Tower West and meetups and people organizing games together. So if you're a channel member, please go and check out the private Discord for that information. If you are just headed to Dice Tower West and you're not a channel member, don't worry. We will be very much everywhere hanging out. You'll no doubt spot us and hopefully we can have a game together. But otherwise, we'll see everyone next week for Back Chat. But bye for now.
Bye.